This is SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. My name is Todd Kirk. I'm your host. I'm joined by my ever-present co-host, Casey Trujillo, who I discovered yesterday loves going on roller coasters as long as he's being forced to go on them by my cute 7-year-old who will force him to go. So, Casey, hopefully you're not too you don't have too much churning in the stomach after we went to Lagoon together, Casey and I, yesterday, and it was a good time.
Yeah, local amusement park. I let Todd's son know because Todd and obviously his wife and children like to go ride the bigger rides. I have not graduated to that. I told your son that this is the last year. It's not happening again because he's going to be too big.
He's going to be tall enough to ride the big stuff.
He's going to force me on all the other ones. I'm not doing that, Todd.
Well, good deal, Casey. Well, we are joined by John Lay today, who is the founder and CEO and lead analyst at Talented Learning. He's a fierce independent consultant, blogger, podcaster, speaker, educator. He goes around. If you've gone to any conferences that are in this space, you've likely heard of him. Great guy. We've known John now for, I think how long ago did we meet, John? Probably at least a year or so.
I think last 7 months.
Yeah. Okay. So that's about right. So John's awesome. He's got 25 plus years of learning industry experience, serving as a trusted LMS selection and sales advisor to hundreds of organizations with a total technology spend of $100+ million and growing. John is very active on social media, and we oftentimes say this at the end, but go ahead and look for him on LinkedIn because he's a great guy. So, John, welcome to SaaS Therapy. Happy to have you here today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
John, give everyone a background about what you do day in and day out. And I'm not sure if I'm envious of your job, if I would hate your job. So let's let the audience decide. Describe what you do. And then I think people will see where I'm coming from because some of it will be fascinating. Other parts of it I would dread. So John, give people a background.
All right. Well, 12 years ago, I started Talented Learning. We're an independent research and analyst firm. And what we do is we study the learning systems marketplace and all the vendor solutions that are in there. And then on a daily basis, we help organizations find and buy their best learning solution. So as a consultant, an LMS selection consultant or learning system selection consultant, I help organizations define their business case, use cases, and all of their requirements from functional and technical and service, budget-wise. And then I write the RFP, a job that nobody likes. And
that's so the part right there. You lost me, John. I'm like, no.
Nobody likes that part, so I do it time and time again just to because that's a job so hated. But write the RFPs, and then I help my organizations or my clients conduct a formal and professional buying process. So through formal requests for proposals, use case demonstrations, and references and sandboxes and things like that.
Very cool. And I think most of our audience would be in regards to an external learning management system. But do you also help with internal learning management systems? And again, that might confuse some of our audience today, but just in case people have the context, are you both helping to support customers and then, of course, internal for their own organization? And I know there's some LMSs that do both, but just give them a scope of all the learning management systems that you're doing.
Yeah, there's a lot of different use cases out there. I've specialized in my whole career, almost 30 years now, in the external learning use cases. So the majority of my customers are customer education, partner education, both of those. Sometimes that includes frontline or customer-facing employees also. I generally stay away from pure employee type learning situations. There's other consultants, and customer education is too much fun.
I love that. It's the joke that came to my mind, John, and you may or may not appreciate this comparison, is I thought immediately of the television show Friends. Mm-hmm. And if you remember, Rachel Green, the first real job she got after she was a waitress was as a professional shopper. And basically right. she would go out and she would help guys figure out what clothes to buy. That was like her first job. And so I was like, are you like Rachel Green, but specifically for software? You're a professional shopper. You help people find the right solutions for themselves.
It hasn't been described like that, but yeah. That's exactly it.
So
it's just time and time again. So I I've went through the process, the formal process now about 150 times with different organizations. And so each time is different though. Every organization is different, their requirements, the industry they play in, what they're trying to achieve, their business goals. And so it's actually really exciting in the sense that I just get to learn a new business. Every few weeks I start a new business and get in really deep and help them achieve their goals. And it's a unique spot. I don't know of anybody that does exactly what I do. So I kind of just found my own way in life and found doing the same thing over and over again that I enjoy.
Yeah, which actually that the very first thing I wanted to ask after I thought on my funny Rachel Green comparison was how the heck did you come up with this or start doing this at all? You've
Yeah.
obviously been at this for 25 years, but how I don't know, is this something you just fell into? Like, how did you come up with the idea of like, I'm going to help people, analyze LMSs and determine what they're going to buy from help them with the go-to-market strategy and all this stuff. Like, how do you get there?
Yeah, it's kind of a unique path, but I almost 30 years ago I got a master's degree in instructional technology, and one of the classes that I had to take was basically responding to RFP class. Had a
Oh
fancier
man.
title than that, but they formed the class into different groups, and each group created a fake company, and we responded to a fake RFP, actually a real RFP in the industry, but fake for the class, and I loved it. And when yeah, I loved it. I had such a good time on the selling side, and so like 98, 99% of the graduates of that program got into building content, doing content, HR, working for universities, and I went and tried to get a sales job, and I
Hmm.
did. And so for 14 years, I carried an enterprise sales bag, working for two of the largest LMS providers, and where all my peers were focusing on internal employee and talent development and performance development type opportunities for employees. I just lived and focused and prospected 100% for customer education, partner education, training as a business opportunities, and I killed it. I did really well in those 14 years, and I looked around. I just couldn't understand why there wasn't more competition in that sector, and why more organizations weren't taking that seriously. And so I thought, wow, there's no analysts talking about it. There's no articles about it. So I thought, hey, the bar is pretty low. How about me? And so so I quit my job and I started Talented Learning, and I gave myself 6 months to see if I could find a client. And so what I started doing was blogging about customer education and partner
Hmm.
education, how to buy, features to worry about, results. And at about 5.5 months, I found my first client, and 150 later, I'm still going. So
That's
that's how it
amazing, John.
started. And if you want to know how you become an analyst per se, here's my strategy. I just started telling everybody I was an analyst, and after a while, somebody believed it.
I love it. So good. Okay, John, I'm gonna put you in the hot seat. And again,
All
remember, in on this is SaaS therapy, so there is really no right answers. It's just internal thinking and analyzing. So often I come across software vendors that are maybe Series A getting into their Series B. They have a nice growth taking place, and all of a sudden they're like, "Wow, how do we do all this? We need to track our customers and make sure that we're spending enough time in renewing them. And we started a CS team going. We're taking a ton of calls. So, gosh, we should start to think about a knowledge base, kind of like a Zendesk, a support ticket system. And then we hear about this learning management system. We think we're going to maybe hire someone in customer ed and get them over there. And I often get the question, where do you start? Do you start with a customer success platform? Do you start with a knowledge-based support ticketing system? Do you start with a learning management system? And again, they all have their benefits. You cannot answer it depends, John. That's the rule in this show is there's no it depends. If you were,
That's his analyst credentials. I
I
thought that's
know,
what
I
all
know.
analysts have to start with.
If you
Well,
had to put again, just taking everybody at just the same situation, how would you prioritize those items? Again, they're about series. It just got Series B funding. They're growing. All three of these things need help. Where would you start, and why would you start the way you would suggest?
yeah, so that's obviously a tough question because all three of them need to be built up. And I certainly have the bias towards learning. But I think in all things, in learning or in business in general, it starts with what the business need is. So to prioritize what the biggest pain is. Is it that you can't onboard clients? Is it that you can't find leads? Is it that your customer satisfaction rating is going through the tank? Is it because you can't answer the calls? Which one of those problems? You probably have all of those problems as you're accelerating from that A to B round, but which one of those is causing the most pain, and then work backwards from there. And that could be the onboarding process, which is a learning system. It could be something else, which would be a customer support system or something else. So that's how I would prioritize it. At the beginning, an organization, a startup like that, that you got a lot of problems. And so what's the one that's hurting the most is where I would start.
Did you notice, Casey, how John, that's evidence that he's a really good analyst, because he answered "it depends"
without saying it.
Genius move. And actually, I think it's such a really good point, because it's oftentimes we usually are looking for shortcuts. You're right. Heuristics is just the way we generally operate as humans, as we're trying to figure out, how do I make decisions easy? And the way we usually make decisions easy is, what does everybody else do? Or what is the kind of standard framework or the standard path? So I like the fact that you're like, well, here's a framework. The framework is focus on the biggest business need that you have as an organization. So it's an easy way to think about it. But John, obviously you've been at this for a long time. What do you think is the biggest mistake that people make whenever they do start going down this road, as they start trying to figure out, okay, I need to find a solution. Obviously I've identified there's a big pain, and I need to go and determine a solution that's going to solve my problem. What's the biggest mistake that people make as a buyer when they're trying to figure out where they want to go and what they want to do?
I think the biggest mistake that they make is wanting to do it too fast. And so it's just like building a house. You just don't start buying 2x4s and nailing them together. You got to take your time and hire an architect and plan it out and figure out exactly what you want and get that framework and put that in place first. Then you go through the process of actually buying and implementing, or building and implementing it in that case. I think buyers, a lot of times, they get the head count, they have the personnel, and it's like, okay, we got to go buy something, we got to do it. And they haven't stepped back to think about, all right, what are the use cases? So now we just talked about what's the biggest business need. Now you take that down a level and you say, okay, now you got the learning system. We could do a ton of things. We could help the sales team, we can help the marketing team, we can help the customer service team, we can help the onboarding folks. You have to look at all those problems now that learning can solve, and do the same thing and prioritizing them and fleshing those out from use case, from business goal to use case. And then most importantly, how you're going to be successful. So what is that measuring strategy, and what is that business impact that you're trying to make and that you can measure? And so if you don't have all those questions answered and you're talking to vendors, you're wasting everybody's time, really. In my opinion, you should really have that fleshed out as an organization, and then use that as the lens to talk to vendors, to educate vendors, and to go through a buying process. I think if you skip to the fun and looking at the AI and let's see all this cool stuff, you end up with the wrong system. And that's typically who hires me then, is to help them the second time to not make that mistake again.
John, help us understand in regards to this is a question I often get asked too. And again, I'm comparing myself to an expert, so that's why I'm asking you, so I can change my answers to the right answer. People always say, should I charge for our customer education? Obviously, table stakes, professional services, you're doing instructional training. Of course, you have a human assigned to that. Of course, you got to charge for that. I don't know anybody that doesn't charge for a human being. But in regards to learning management systems, I hear a bunch of different things. I hear people say, well, there should be a basis of a free amount of content, and then you should charge for a certain amount of content. I think we had Donna Weber on, Todd, and her data said that less than 70% of software vendors actually charge for their education. And she thinks it's a disservice. You only value what you pay for, is what she talks about. What are some guiding principles? Because I'm not going to ask John, should you or shouldn't, because he's going to give me a depends. So I'm going to this time, Todd, I'm not going into that trap. What are some guiding principles, John, that you would give to people, or that you consult with people around, okay, leadership wants us to charge something for education outside of instructional training? What are some guiding principles that people should think about?
I don't think that's the low-hanging fruit, charging for the training. So at its core, whether you're helping in the attract new customer phase of the customer life cycle, or you're onboarding, or you're supporting over time, it's in your organization's best interest to provide that education to help everybody get to that next stage. So to get more leads that are educated, qualified, to shorten that time of onboarding, to improve the customer satisfaction coming out of onboarding, and to get your customers continually renewing and growing and cross-selling themselves over time through education. And since all of those can be measured, and all of those are go to market metrics in the sense that they can be measured and tied to revenue and actual dollars and cents coming into the organization, typically the free education to drive those benefits is worth it. With that being said, lots of organizations, as they mature and they go through the levels of maturity, it becomes to develop advocates and for your best users, and to support the driving more leads. Organizations then a lot of times release certifications. So these certifications are a higher level, more industry neutral type certification. And those are the ones that start getting charged for. You can start there, but you still have all the other problems of onboarding and educated qualified lead driving and supporting and customer set and driving out calls. And all that needs to be done on your own dime, on my opinion. And then the premium stuff is what you're using to as a maturity to drive new clients, and then to really build that awareness in the market. So you're actually showing up on LinkedIn as your certification is showing up, but then also on job requests that they want that particular certification. And so that's where you mature into. And so I think you can start customer education without selling for a lot. And then one last caveat on that. Sometimes it's so technical, like with medical devices and things like that. Then there is, they do have a fee when they're actually bringing people in and machines in, and trying to train you on staff. That obviously has charge. But if you're trying to scale your digital platform, I think the business benefits far outweigh the revenue income stream.
Hmm. John, if I could, I want to change gears just a smidge, because I think one of the things that I've obviously been thinking about in this conversation is, in any deal, Casey and I called this SaaS Therapy when we first started the show, because it's all about the relationship between the buyer and the seller. And, for what you're doing and where your role is, you're oftentimes working with the person who's buying the software, right? That software just happens to be a very specific niche type of SaaS tool. Usually it's an LMS of some kind for customer education. But I think in a more broad sense, the buying process and understanding how a customer approaches an enterprise SaaS solution and how they want to buy it is probably really relevant to a lot of our audience, even if they're outside of customer ed. So I'm curious to get a sense from your perspective, when a buyer is trying to think through an RFP, what are some of the things that you see are kind of the questions that they have and the way that they think about the buying process? Because I think it might be helpful for those who are trying to sell a SaaS solution to then figure out, okay, how do I understand the mindset of the person who's trying to buy it? So any insights you can give us there, and kind of the mindset of the buyer is what kind of how they approach the buying process and the things they're looking for generally in an RFP?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think probably the most important thing to remember is people don't buy enterprise software for fun. It's not like they're looking for something to do. It's because they're trying to solve a problem. And that problem is big enough that it's percolated through the system, up through a business case, got executive approval because the problem's big enough. And so now they're going out for a software and to find out the different avenues they have to solve that problem. And so that's where buyers are coming from time and time again to solve that problem. That problem is organizational, but the responsibility a lot of time is personal, and personal on the team. So there's personal risk at stake, there's professional risk at stake, there is organizational risk at stake for making a bad choice on this. And so there's risk aversion in buyers, and there's a desire for success, but there's risk aversion. But at the end of the day, it's about solving that business problem. So flip back to old John Lay carrying a consulting bag. Your job selling that SaaS solution is to figure out what that problem is, figure out what that pain is, figure out why they're doing it, figure out the other avenues that they tried that they didn't do it, to understand exactly what is going to be measurable success criteria and how you know they're going to be successful. And you do consultative sales 101 to then build your solution around solving that problem and then articulating how your solution solves exactly what they're trying to do and how they're going to be able to prove that. And so I think buyers have to look at it starting with the business, and sellers have to look at it starting with the business case and work backwards from there, because it's not about gamification features. It's not about whether you can have this or that, or whether your AI analyze can do this, or your dashboards are this color or this deep. It all is about they're judged by solving the problem. And that's why they're there in the first place. And so sellers need to know that and align to that. Otherwise, they're just order takers.
Interesting. Great feedback on that, John. And I think sometimes when you see an RFP, you see all these features and then you get lost in the features and again, miss out on asking those questions about what the problem is we're trying to solve. So great advice there. John, I install a learning management system and everybody should just come to it. It's interesting how people get shocked that doesn't happen. So, what are one or two or three guiding principles that, yes, I went to the RFP, I followed what John told me to do. I bought the best LMS for our organization. It matched all the needs and nothing's happening. Why does that take place? Where do people miss out when they buy a solution? What are some things they're forgetting about? What are one or two, three things that they're forgetting about? One that I always tell people is, well, how is this part of the playbook? How has customer success bought into this? How has implementation team bought into this? Do they see this as a help, or is this just another resource? Because if you fall into another resource, it is not getting used. It is just going to sit there on the shelf, and all that hard work you put in is for nothing. So what's some advice you would give to people in making sure they understand that, yes, buying the requirements of a learning management system is so important, but I don't believe that for 1 second, if you just put together an LMS, that everybody's going to come there. What are some other things they should be thinking about?
Yeah. So I'm probably hitting this theme too hard, but it really is so important. If you're starting out with what the business problem is, you're not going to have a problem with getting people to use your solution. So if you're starting from the business need, then they want to use that solution. So
John, talk more about that. Because I think the business need people to go in as customer education. I need something that does this and this and this for us as customer education. You're hitting at something different, which is the business need of going to these different groups that interact with customers. I think that is, again, another problem I see with people that buy a learning management system is, what's the best fit for our customer education team? What's going to make it easiest for us to create a course? What's going to be easiest for us to do? And it's very personal versus business centric. So we dive more into that, what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. I think all the things that you're talking about are important, so for the people who are running that, they certainly, want to have these tools and disposal at their hands. But at the end of the day, customer education is about driving revenue. And so you can think about a lot of things, but that's what it's about. If you're not driving revenue, you're not doing anything, for your organization. So if you just build something and it's not based on business goals and you put a whole bunch of content out there and, you expect people to come, they're not going to come because you're not trying to solve anything. But if you go back to what we've been talking about, say, okay, what's the biggest problem? Right now, our biggest problem is it takes our 6 months to onboard a new customer. And we can't even start it for 2 months after they sign the contract. That's our problem. Solve that. Well, you solve that by saying, okay, well, first we'll build a little pre-education here. We'll narrow that first 2 months down, give them something to do as we work through our pipeline. Then we're going to basically install them on the team, have our implementation teams use this as the focus, and then we're going to drive them through the process so that we can shorten that to 3 months. And guess what, buyer? You don't want to sit out here in 6 months. You didn't spend $1 million to wait 6 months to see any value. You want to see that value in 3 months. Not only that, you bought our system because we're talking about this value as part of why you want to choose our solution in the first place. And so if you're solving a problem and you're using that solution as part of your sales process, and they understand, your client, pre-client, and then post-client understands that's why they bought your solution, you're going to have 100% usage. I mean, people will use it all the time. So if you keep on tying back to the problem you're going to solve and how you're going to be successful, you won't have those problems. If you build in a vacuum, you'll always have those problems. If you're not tied to business goals, you'll always have those problems. If you think you know what your customers need without talking to them, you'll always have those problems of people not coming. So tying to business, and I just touched it on the last piece, is that constant feedback solicitation from your customers. And that allows you to change course at not once a year or twice every 2 years, but to change micro course, to be able to constantly see, what's needed and what's being asked for. You asked earlier, Casey, about, which one of those comes first. I should have added that part too. What our customers want most? Do they need help while they're using the system? Is that what they're complaining about? Or are they just frustrated with the learning curve of learning it the first time? Those type of things will help drive and also prioritize which parts you tackle first. It's not an event, customer education. It's a process. You're never, ever done. So it's always about getting a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that's the part that's interesting to me is the fact that it, sometimes I think you said it really well, and I don't think I've ever really thought about it this way, in the sense that we oftentimes think about the individual risk and the organizational risk, but I like that you broke the individual risk into two different types, right? Because you mentioned there's the personal risk and there's the professional risk to the individual. Because to me, it's like and maybe this is a bad example, but Casey kind of made me think of this with this question earlier. For me, it's
as long
like,
as it's not a Franz example, dude, just get out of Franz. We can't go there again.
well,
So anyway,
you need to chat me
yeah.
your examples before you say them on the podcast, so I can say thumbs
so
up.
the episode
down.
with Joey and Chandler with the duck and the chicken, anyway, I have no idea where I was going with that. But no, so the personal risk is interesting to me, because a lot of times, someone thinks about a solution in the sense of, okay, what type of work is this going to generate for me? Am I going to have to work longer hours? Is this going to add additional stress? Am I going to be able to, accomplish my other tasks as well as I can? Whereas like the professional risk would be like, is there a chance that I'm going to get promoted? Is there a chance that I'm going to get fired if this goes poorly? And so there's a different element between personal and professional. And I think a lot of times, at least in my experience, there's such an emotional component to finding a solution for your organization that usually the personal and the professional risk tend to take a lot more weight than even the organizational risk. Because right, we all are self-interested, and that causes it can cause a rub. So I'm curious, how do we figure out how to balance that better for individuals? Meaning like, and even if you're a seller, how do you go in and understand that risk to them so that you can figure out how to help them prioritize what those risk levels are? Or even help them understand, like, do you just call more attention to the personal and professional risk up front as a seller, because that's oftentimes the emotional barrier for a lot of people? Or do you try to shift their focus more to the organizational risk? Like, I don't know. Obviously I'm not a sales guy. Both of you have more of a sales background, so I'm just curious, when you think about that, you're trying to change perceptions if you're trying to help somebody make a change with their organization, and what buttons do you press the hardest?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess there's two ways to approach it, two philosophies that I've seen in my career. One is risk aversion, and one is success enablement. The other is success enablement. And so, and really, you can use both. I've always been on the glass half full side. I'm always, as a salesperson, I was always looking to see, how can I enable the success? How can I help you be successful? How personally, professionally, as an organization, how can I help you be competitive, get that differentiation? So that's been my approach. Other people that I see take the exact opposite approach, where they pick at the scab of risk all the time, in the sense, at the personal level, at the professional level, and at the organizational level, to the same end of trying to get your solution positioned as the one that either avoids that risk or enables that solution. And so I don't know if one's more right. I always enjoyed being positive, but at the same time, as a good seller, it's important to understand which of those three types of risk are most important to them.
Yeah.
You might be in your 60s and your professional risk level is really high because you don't give a hoot if, to be your last job, so that one might not work, or you could be 23 and full of vinegar,
Yeah.
where, that one's the most important. And so, a good seller as part of that process is going to try to figure out what the upsides are, and I guess what the downsides are to the organization. A good question to ask is, what happens if you don't meet those goals? After you determine what the goals are, why they're doing this. If you're not successful, what happens? What happens to you personally? And be able to understand that is good questions to ask. And admittedly, I don't know if I ask those personal risk questions as much as I probably should.
John, I asked that once in a call. What happens in 12 months from now if we're sitting in the same situation? He goes, nothing.
Hmm.
And I go, well, we're not the right solution for you then. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
Ours will still be good.
We've had 3 calls talking about where you want to go. And then at the end of the day, you're like, well, nothing happens to me. So, okay, well, yeah, you're not going to drive this. John, I've
If you hear
loved this
something like that, then money
Yeah.
cost is the determining factor. So if
Yeah.
you ever, as a seller, if you're losing on cost, it's a lot of times because it's not strategic enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I've loved this conversation because I get asked you all the questions I get asked all the time. So it's like I'm getting sales practice to hear from
All
you
right.
how you're answering this. Ooh, I'm gonna steal that phrase, picking at a scab. That's just so graphic and just
It's so
um,
Pennsylvanian, say something like that.
okay, I hear this one a ton, John. This is another one I hear all the time. Well, our learning management system, it's just not working out for us. So what we're going to do is we're just going to get better at keeping the customer in the product. So we're going to put more resources. We're going to create greater training inside of our digital adoption platform. And that's where we're going to put everything. We're not going to put so much focus on our learning management system because, we want them to stay within it and no one wants to leave the software. They all want to stay in it. Now, obviously, just to set background for everybody, you need them all. Like, yeah, I'm a firm believer you need a digital adoption platform. You need an LMS. You need a customer success platform. You need a knowledge base. Like, this is part of your tech stack today, right? But how would you answer that one when people think, oh, my silver bullet is just putting more education resources inside of our software, and then as a user's in there and they're at some feature, this window is going to pop up and magically the user is going to say, yes, I was looking for that training. What's your answer to that? How would you respond?
Geez, I don't disagree with it. I don't disagree with it. I just think of myself, if I'm in HubSpot and I'm trying to do something, the last thing I want to do is stop and go to HubSpot University and try to find, that the answer to what I'm trying to do. And so in that nature, to be able to have that support right there at your fingertips when you need it, as you need it, makes a lot of sense for a lot of different types of users, including myself. In some cases, the education that you need at the moment is very different than like that certification that we were talking about prior to that. You don't want that full certification to pop up, while I'm trying to hook up a pipeline in HubSpot. It'd be too much. So there's, like you said, it's part of the tech stack. You need both, but to help and enable as much as you can while you're inside the software, I think is a great idea. And one of the ways we haven't talked about AI yet today, amazingly, but AI is really helping with that, with agentic learning and being able to, help users at the time. And so, how do I do this? And asking that question, but not have a dumb bot, that had to be pre-programmed to know that, but intelligent enough to go back to the database inside this video and this PDF to come back and give you the answer, that you need. And so that's happened. That's some of the most advanced things I'm thinking is bringing these agents into that user
Mm,
experience, which is going to limit the need of going outside to a third party place for the software. So I do believe that's coming in different flavors. And then finally, I think what we've seen for years is people pumping video or different content from their learning management system. That would be one of the options. So if you hit help on any given screen, you could get the text help, you could get, watch a
yeah.
video or even, take some more content, kind of like 3 different layers of severity of how to address that particular knowledge gap. And so that kind of stuff, I see in different solutions. And so to answer your question, that's one of the pieces, so you got to get them onboarded. You got to increase the amount of leads, educated, qualified leads. But then over time, you want to be able to help them inside the application. And so it goes back to where we started this. Where's the biggest pain point? Where you're getting the most
Yeah.
negative feedback as a way to prioritize which one of those buckets you want to invest more heavily in.
Yeah, I always go back to I try to do what you talk about all the time and say, okay, let's go back to what we've talked about. What's the business outcome we're trying to do? We're trying to shorten down from 6 months to 3 months. Let's all agree on that. Okay, we agreed. Where I then go is saying, okay, let's look at data. So today, inside of your application, when those windows pop up, what percent of people are clicking on them? What people go in and actually watch the content? And then what percent of people actually go do what you wanted them to do? Look at your learning management system. Ask yourself the same questions. How many of your users actually go into your product every day? If 50% of your users, total licensed users, don't even open up your product and you're trying to get better adoption and you're doing it all in app, well, you're missing 50% of your user base. So look at your total licensed users and then work backwards, remembering the business outcome. And then you're going to pull some levers here and there. Like I feel like people always feel like it's a one door option instead of a two-way door option of like, go test something. Go, yeah, change the experience inside of the application. Did it result in the behavior change to the business outcome if you wanted? How did that look? You made some changes with your LMS. How did that look? You made some changes to your and how did that look? Like, I just think people get so fixed on this is going to solve it. I'm going to go do it. I'm going to wait a year and then go back and revisit it. I just think people need to be more fluid in remembering the business outcome, like you talked about, work backwards with data, and then look at all the data to say, okay, what is the way, where can we make best impact? So that's the advice I give. And John, I love your advice. I'm going to add that into my repertoire also. And I think you want to make another comment, add one more to it.
Well, I'll add one more to it. I think what I see the best organizations doing, especially with software applications, is taking the telemetry from the user data and using that as a way to drive learning. So in that scenario that you just mentioned, if those 50% aren't logging in, we should know who those 50% are because we're actually monitoring that data, and then we can proactively drop them in a HubSpot drip campaign, or we can have customer service contact them, or we could do different things so that we could get them into that right group. Or if they're using this feature but not this next feature that's so natural, how can we learn that and be able to push learning proactively based on that? So that's the most sophisticated stuff that I'm seeing right now, is being able to take that actual user data and then drive that into learning experiences somehow, all to move the business needle in a measurable way.
Yeah. No, and I agree. I think there has to be there has to be a mindset shift in the way that customer education is viewed, because one of the things that I think can be a little bit of a blocker for a lot of organizations is they kind of assume that education is only going to serve the audience that they already have, and if your focus is only on serving those who already are paying attention to you, then like really what you end up becoming is just an optimization tool, and that's it. So, oh, well, John wants to figure out how to do this thing. He's going to probably move heaven and earth to do it. He might be dissatisfied. He might be frustrated. He might give us a low NPS score if he can't find the answer, but he's going to work to find the answer. But what about all the people who don't care, who aren't already looking for the answer, who aren't even going into the application at all? And does education have a role to play there? And my answer to that has always been yes. And I think, if you think about customer education from the perspective as it's a change management problem, it's a little bit of a bigger thing you're trying to solve. And I think you become way more strategic to the organization if you are a customer education professional and you're actually thinking about how do I reach everyone, not just how do I better support the people who are already listening to me? It's like then what you end up with. I'm going to use another analogy, Casey, because it won't be a Friends one, but it will be a Star Wars one. So if you think about Star Wars, right? So Star Wars has an audience, and that audience, a lot of people complain about Star Wars all the time, but they're still big Star Wars fans. But there's a lot of people who have never seen Star Wars, don't care about Star Wars, never want to watch Star Wars. And unless you get them to actually try it out for the very first time, it doesn't really matter. So the real question is like, okay, so is customer education meant to answer all the little nitty gritty things about the people who already care about Star Wars and are watching all the movies and reading all the books. And, we're just trying to answer trivia questions for them so they can give a so what cool answer to their friends. Or are we trying to find more fans of Star Wars? So I don't know if that's do you
Yeah.
like that one better, Casey, or worse? You don't like
Yeah.
my pop culture references, apparently. So
That's kind of like politics too, or you just preach to the choir, or are you always trying to have a bigger tent and
yeah, exactly.
bring more folks into it. And so I think the answer is yes, and especially if you're focused on the business need and measuring. So if you know what happens when somebody is properly educated and how they behave with your company in terms of renewal, NPS, calls to support, amount of referrals, social mentions, if you know that, then and 50% aren't using that software, well, then just moving that needle 1% has business benefit. Moving it 10% has a lot. So to answer your question, I think it's important for customer education to expand that tent and to go after that half that's not using it, because it only adds to the measurable business impact. And that business impact, the bigger it is, makes it easier for you to mature your customer education organization with more staff, more resources, more staff and resources to have more impact, because it's working and it's proven. And so everything starts getting easy once you can tie it back to revenue in doing this. And so if you've got this huge opportunity of people that aren't using it optimally, then in some ways that's your almost lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah, and I would say, at least in my experience, the most sophisticated buyers that I've talked to, the customer education people are not the only people who are involved in that discussion. Usually what ends up happening is customer success is invested and cares and is actually going to incorporate the customer education platform into their strategy. And oftentimes, what's been really interesting to me is when I've seen and this maybe this is unique to Brainstorm. I don't know, just because of the way that we approach the market. When sellers get a hold of it and they realize that this is something that can help them close more deals, right? Is this a tool that's going to then make the customer feel more confident that they will receive the enablement that will ensure they're going to be successful when they purchase? So there's the whole question of who are all the different parties that should be involved. And usually the more sophisticated buyers are the ones who actually see this as a solution that is going to help them close new business, help them retain customers longer. And that means you have to start bringing in the external facing teams that actually work with the customer. Because at least I don't know if this is common or not, John, but it seems like a lot of the customer education professionals who are involved in purchasing are oftentimes insulated from the customer themselves. Like they don't really directly interface with them. They're just making content. They're making resources. Maybe if they do, they're being called in to train somebody every once in a while, but they're not actually thinking about the needs of the customer and the pain points that the sales team and the CSM team is experiencing. Would you say that's common for what you see as well? I have run into that where I'm just like, come on, you're not you don't seem like a strategic resource at all, because you're mostly just like, look at all the courses I made, and that's not really what the business is even asking for. Thoughts on that at all?
Yeah. So there's levels of maturity, of course, in customer education. And so if people are focused on building content, they're focused on logins, number of courses, course completions. Those are all really neat things that trainers care about and nobody else does. Um, that's level one, is to really worry about those things. Level 2 and 3 is when you start tying those to operations and to business outcome. And so course completions in themselves don't mean anything, but course completions, if you look at the performance of people that actually completed that course and how they're responding in your business, how they're acting in your business, now that starts to have value. And so when I get approached by organizations, I'm constantly trying to
Yeah.
immediately trying to judge where they're at in this maturity level, because the lower on the maturity level, they have really one buyer, one point of contact. So when you think about the customer life cycle, you try to attract new customers, you onboard those customers, then you support them over time, and then you develop them into advocates so that you can attract more customers, and you go around the circle again in the process. Well, if the organization is focused on attracting new customers, your owners are going to be channel sales, marketing. If your organization, your customer education organization, is looking on the onboarding piece, then a lot of times you'll have your customer success teams, your product groups, that are responsible for that. And during the ongoing and support phase, and in the advocacy phase, you'll have different points of contact. And across all of those is really the ecosystem that a mature customer education system needs to have, with executives, with the product groups, with content development, with marketing, with sales, are all voices that are a part and touch the customers and are all part of a healthy ecosystem. And so the most mature organizations have these stakeholders that are different around the wheel of the life cycle, but they're all part of the same team, all trying to drive the betterment of the business, just in different parts of the business at any given time.
John, this has been awesome. So many great things to think about. You've given me a lot of things to consider as I'm doing my day-to-day work. So thank you very much. With SaaS Therapy, it's awesome because we always get to end with one last question. Because if you ever go to therapy, which I highly recommend, your therapist is always going to say, we're going to work on something. So when the next time you come back, you can talk to me about it, right? So John, as we leave our audience today, what would be your homework assignment? You're the therapist. You get to assign a homework to our users. What would it be?
My homework to you is never build a piece of content, never buy a learning system, never do one thing in customer education if you haven't done the homework to tie that back to the business needle that you're trying to move. If you're building something and you can't say immediately what that's going to impact in your organization, you're probably wasting time. So what I would work on is make sure that every one of your efforts in customer education has a direct linkage back to revenue.
It's awesome. Todd, that was awesome.
Thank you, John, for joining us today. And for those who are regular listeners, we'd love your thoughts. Leave us a comment. Follow us if you're new. We release new episodes every week. And thanks everybody for being with us. And John, thanks again.
Thanks for having me. It was great conversation.
SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.